Daniel Ortega, who's been president of Nicaragua since 2007. There's been some recent unrest, violence. What's going on? First, according to how the mainstream media presents it, and then according to what you believe is actually happening.
It's really shocking. If you just Google Nicaragua, you'll find a Greek chorus of pro-regime change, gray propaganda in every outlet from The Guardian to Democracy Now! To the New York Times. And none of them did what I did, have done what I did, which was to actually go to Nicaragua and talk to the masses of Sandinista supporters who are abused and tortured during a violent right-wing coup attempt that nearly shut down the country, cost it $500 million, and was designed not just to topple Daniel Ortega, but to destroy the Sandinista movement of 2 to 2.5 million people, one of the most cohesive movements progressive social change to benefit workers in Latin America. And that's what this is about. It was about destroying an example of socialism to the rest of Latin America. It was funded substantially by USAID and the regime change arm of the United States, the National Endowment for Democracy. And we don't hear about any of that. We don't meet any of the student leaders who were beaten half to death, shot or tortured because they turned against this plan for regime change, and we see no analysis of it. What it was a classic color revolution like the kind we saw in Eastern Europe, blended with the horrors of Libya and Syria, except fortunately for the people of Nicaragua, the rebels in this case were not armed by the US. If they had been, the bloodshed would still be continuing. The Sandinista government has defeated a coup, and in the U.S. media, it's still being portrayed as some kind of people's revolution. It was a right-wing counter-revolution.
Any connection to Venezuela?
Very similar to what we saw in Venezuela with the Garimbas, where the right-wing opposition would close off entire neighborhoods with roadblocks to try to damage the economy. They would attack any supporters of the government in that area, and then they'd begin clashing with the police who were attempting to restore order. They actually shared tactics online and even traveled to Nicaragua to share their violent tactics. And for the first time in Nicaragua, we didn't see this during the Civil War in the 1980s. Supporters of the Sandinistas were burned alive. Burned alive. That's what we saw in Venezuela. There were public humiliations, people lashed to trees and stripped nude and whipped on video. I interviewed the wife of a police officer who on his day off was kidnapped by the opposition, dragged by a truck, and taken to a roadblock where he was burned alive on video. The video's there for everyone to see, but for some reason, U.S. media isn't reporting this side. And as I reported at the Gray Zone Project, working with an independent researcher in Nicaragua to do a case-by-case analysis of each death that occurred between the middle of June and April 18th when this kicked off. Sandinistas have probably suffered more deaths, more murders at the hands of the opposition than the opposition suffered at the hands of Daniel Ortega's government. So this is the big lie that is being pushed in Congress and in the media, that Ortega and his government have killed over 300 people. That's totally false.
Max Blumenthal, we're out of time. Thanks for being on the Kaiser Report.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Max Blumenthal. You can reach us on Twitter at Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.